World of possibilities, along with the world of challenges. Join Joel Lewis as he interviews successful entrepreneur dads sharing how they made it work from the start. This is Startup Dad HQ.
Hey, welcome to Startup Dad Headquarters. This is Joel Lewis, and welcome to another amazing episode. And I'm already predicting that it's going to be an amazing episode. I have a very special guest today, Mike Vardy, who is going to really give us some powerful tips about productivity and fatherhood. That's almost like an oxymoron, I think. Right, so we're gonna see how Mike is gonna wrap this all up and put it together for us, as well as share his journey about being a dad and an entrepreneur. So let me go right into Mike's bio. So Mike Vardy is a writer, speaker, productivity specialist, and the founder of Productivityist. He has served as the managing editor at Lifehack and contributing articles on productivity to 99U, Lifehacker, the Next Web, Success Magazine, and the Huffington Post. Mike is also the author of several books, including The Front Nine, How to Start the Year You Want Anytime You Want, which I know the startup dads are going to love hearing about that, and has delivered talks on topics of task and time management at events like New Media Expo, TEDx Victoria, South by Southwest, Interactive, and creativeLIVE. He lives in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, with his incredible wife, daughter, and son. So that's a little bit about Mike. I'm sure I haven't done it justice. So I'm going to bring Mike in so he could give us a little bit more about who he is, what he's currently working on, and what's exciting about his business right now before we dive deep into his beginning story, right, which is what Startup Dad is all about. So let's bring Mike in right now. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Great, Joel. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm doing awesome. It's great to have you on. What time is it over there anyway?
It is 7:30, just shortly after 7:30 Pacific time. So I still got some light coming in off of the patio here, which is kind of nice.
Nice, awesome. So why don't you, I shared a little bit about you in the intro. Why don't you just let us know a little bit more about what you got going on right now, what's exciting you about your business and your personal life and things like that.
Well, I just finished coming back from the podcast movement conference in Dallas, and I spent a bit of time in San Antonio, which that's going to be our next family vacation spot because I loved it there. But right now, it's funny. I was telling you before we started that the next 3 days, my wife and kids are up what we call up island, so they've gone north onto one of the small little communities. So I've got 3 days to myself. So this is foreign to me completely, but I'm getting some strategizing done. I'm working on.
What do I do?
Exactly. It's too quiet. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Right.
too quiet.
Right.
But I'm working on a book. I'm co-authoring a book with Jeremy Roberts called Do Better with Asana, which is kind of like the unofficial training guide for Asana, the task management app. I'm also
Love that app.
I'm starting to put together a book for like my next big book, the more of the follow up to the Front Nine. It's not called the Back Nine, and I'm launching my own podcast next week. So I'm currently doing a podcast on the 5x5 network with Michael Schechter called Mike's on Mics. But I'm starting the Productivityist podcast as of next week. So I'm putting together a Patreon campaign for that. So I'm really excited about all the stuff that I've got going on. I'm working on Productivityist coaching, which has been a huge thing for me over the last few months. I'm looking at adding a whole bunch of facets to that. So yeah, I mean, you know how it is. When you're an entrepreneur, you've got all these ideas, and you just have to kind of line them up and peg them off as you go, rather than try to. I don't like juggling. Let's put it that way. So I like to shift and move from one to the other. So these next 3 days for me especially are critical for me to be able to say, hey, look, what can I work on now while there's no one around? Like I was telling you, I've got my video cameras and all that stuff set up because my 4-year-old son will not be running around running into them right now. So
Right.
it's one of those things where being a stay-at-home dad and an entrepreneur, I'm in a position where this is very, very unusual. So I'm trying to take advantage of it as much as possible without putting my family out in the process.
Right. Awesome, awesome. You know, I was just talking to a good friend of mine who's also a stay-at-home dad, and I was like, you know, what is it that you would like to hear me ask, you know, the startup dads out there? And he said he would love for me to interview someone who is a stay-at-home dad and, as well as an entrepreneur. So this is perfect timing. I was just talking to him this morning about it too. So
There you
awesome,
go.
awesome. Great. So now you shared a bit about you, and you know, and I know with the time that you have, you're gonna be absolutely productive, right? Because that's that's what you're all about. So, and we love that, and we want to hear more about that on, you know, throughout the talk. Why don't we take a step back a little bit and go, you know, with Startup Dad, we really want to talk about the journey as a dad, as an entrepreneur. Let's share a little bit about that with the Startup Dad community, and you know, let's start off with talking about what is your why? Like, why have you decided to, you know, work on the books that you're working on, the podcast that you're about to launch, the podcast that you're currently working on? Why have you decided to do that as opposed to the, you know, standard 9 to 5 kind of thing?
Well, I used to work for Costco. In fact, I worked for Costco for 12 years, and I was there for. I mean, that was my why for the longest time: earn money, get a good check, have great benefits, all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when what happened is that I went to an improv class with one of my with my roommate at the time, and I did theater all through high school, and I was I did college radio and all that stuff. So I'm definitely a performer type person. I like to be in front of people, and I like to perform. And as soon as I went to that improv class, the acting bug returned, and Costco all of a sudden started to take a bit more of a back seat. But the why really happened actually when my daughter was born. So that would be going on 10 years ago now. Wow, time flies. And I was following a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Colton, who's a singer from Brooklyn. He sings the song. Most people would know him from his cover of Baby Got Back that Glee unceremoniously ripped off. But so I actually emailed him when I was starting my journey into the idea of doing, kind of comedy, because that's what I was focusing on at the time, and I was doing productivity parody at the time as well. And he had told me in a brief email return, when he was able to actually return emails, he said, "Quit your job. Don't tell your wife I told you to quit your job, but quit your job." And that was what I did. But I mean, and by quitting my job, I didn't outright quit Costco. What I did was I stepped down from the full-time management position, and then I went to the part-time door greeter position, the lowest bandwidth job I could have. So that way I could actually support my kid, and also and my family, but also I was able to, still save my energy reserves for the things I really wanted to do. And I didn't actually leave Costco until, I didn't actually leave the full-time workforce, because I'd left Costco and I was working for a film festival here in Victoria. I didn't leave the film festival until my son was born a little over 4 years ago, and that's because at that time I was working online. I was working 40 to 60 hours a week, sometimes 80 when I was working for the film festival and doing stuff for Work Awesome. And I finally said, I can't do this anymore. And my wife, fully accustomed to me making risks at this point, said, "Go ahead, you can make a go of it." And that was over 4 years ago, and I've been doing this full time ever since. And so the why really is, I want my kids. It's for me, but I want my kids to see that you can do anything you want to do in life with hard work, consistent effort and focus. Doesn't matter what you want to do. But you need to be willing to make compromises along the way and sacrifices as well. And that was my why. My why was to say, hey, look, I don't want to be a guy that's working a 9 to 5 and come home miserable, because that's what was happening. I want to be somebody who got to do what he loved to do every single day, made enough money to support his family, and maybe made a little bit more as time goes on, and that has happened. Mm-hmm. But that was the big reason. And I can tell you right now, my wife and I have had this conversation. If I didn't leave Costco, and if I didn't leave those other jobs and wasn't doing what I am doing right now, the 3 days that my family isn't here would be more than 3 days. I probably wouldn't I wouldn't be with my family, because wow. It's and I think that for me was a big. I gotta say it just having the support of a wife like that is of your partner It was so critical. And the kids, they just love the fact that I get to be at home with them as often as I do.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I forgot to, I got you all zoomed in there. Let's back out a little bit. There we go. Sorry about that.
Now you know there's a microphone right here.
Right.
We have the same one.
Yeah, Blue Yeti Pro, right?
Yep, exactly.
Nice. And so that's awesome. And I had an interview not too long ago with a good friend of mine as well, startup dad, and he said once his daughter was born, like the day she was born, it immediately triggered to him. Like he wants to be able to look back at her and say, you could do anything that you want to do, and her to not look back at him and say, but Dad, you never followed your dream.
Mm-hmm. It's so huge because I mean, I was listening to the Fizzle podcast. Actually, no, it was Chase was on our show. What am I talking about? Chase Reeves was on Mike's on Mike's.
Wow, that's awesome.
And he said he was talking about his legacy, right? Like you don't get to decide your legacy. And in fact, in our cases, once you have kids, your kids are kind of they're your legacy, right?
Yeah.
They're representative of the values that you passed on, obviously with an influx of their own. But I mean, my kids are. I mean, they're incredible people to be around. If they weren't, I wouldn't be around them as much as I am. So, I mean, you want to be able to live your life with as little regret as possible. And I have lots of people that I've run across that have said, hey, why, I could never do that. I could never quit my job and do what you do because how would I live? I'm like, you find a way. You find a way. If you really want to do what you want to do, and you can make a go of it. And who was I talking? There's a couple of friends locally here who are trying it, and they're like, I don't understand, it's taking so long, but yet you were able to make it happen right away. I'm like, this has been like 10 years in the making. This year has been a big year for me, but it took 10 years to get there. So, I mean, it's not going to be an overnight thing, and you just need to be resilient. That's all.
Nice. Yeah, I love that because the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
People see things and they see it after the fact and they're like, oh, you became an overnight success, but you've been putting in the work. And in some cases, I had an interview earlier today, it's looking at what are those skills that you've been building up on over the last 10 years or 5 years or 10,000 hours, and then saying, can I take those skills and turn it into something meaningful?
Absolutely. My brother and I were talking the other day, and he's a stay-at-home dad. He's got 3 kids at home, all within they're all toddlers. It gets crazy. So I basically laugh every time I get off the phone with him. But he's like, I should go do this to make money. I'm like, here's the thing. What do you really like to do? He goes, I love being at home with my kids. I'm like, then find a way to earn a living and be home with your kids. And now he's talking about, I think he said he's talking about going to, he likes golfing. He said, well, maybe I'll go and start to learn more about golf and maybe do some stuff in that regard. I'm like, listen, if your big joy is to be at home with your kids, then find a way to do that as often as possible. That's the thing. And then most people they get caught up in the stuff, right? In the, hey, I need to have this or go to, you need to make sacrifices. And the thing is that when you do it often enough and when you get to do what you love to do often enough, those sacrifices don't hurt nearly as much as when you aren't doing something that you love doing.
Absolutely. Awesome. And so Mike, you just shared with us, what's your why, and I know a lot of dads out there, startup dads, could connect with your story. Can you share with us? I had a conversation with Carrie Uberbrunner, the author of Day Job to Dream Job.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things that he talked about was making a decision. How did you make that decision, that final decision that I'm going to do it, and then how did you present that to your wife?
Well, the decision was made, I think as soon as I went to that improv class, I knew. And the decision was then, all right, how do I slowly transition out without, having anybody lose their mind? And I was talking to a friend of mine last night about when I actually did quit, and I didn't tell my wife that I was quitting. So I don't recommend that, but but the thing is that I didn't quit outright. Like I said, I stepped down. And I know that if I had overthought it, you know what I mean? If I had said, if I had let the lizard brain or the resistance or whatever you want to call it infiltrate me too much, then I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have made that decision. Anthony Robbins has that, I've heard him say this many times. The word decide is literally means to cut off, right? So you're cutting off all other options.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it that way, I had no choice. Like, I knew that if I didn't do this, then I would be miserable, or I would lose my family, and I had to say, this is, all right. And it leads to a series of other decisions too. So when I quit, the reason I still say quit is because it needed to sound that final to me for it to register that I was moving on from Costco at some point. Nice. If I had said, "Oh, I'm just stepping down to part-time," that's not powerful enough. That's not, it's like, "Oh, I'm just, I'm scaling back." Even saying something like scaling back, it's really not that, it doesn't have the power of I'm stopping or I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's why, that saying winners never quit and quitters never win, I totally don't think that's true at all. I think you just need to decide, you need to really understand, okay, what is important right now? What's my top priority? What is my priority? I mean, priority is a fallacy anyways. So for me, it was very much hey, there is no other choice here. All right, I've made this decision. This is what I'm going to do. Now, how do I make it a lasting one? How do I make sure that I don't jump back, regret later when I'm driving by Costco, oh boy, I really wish I, hadn't left or whatever. So I think the key is, and I think because I'm able to I'm really good at natural planning in terms of list making and stuff like that, I was able to kind of weigh the pros and cons of it too. And that's the kind of thing you need to do when you're making a decision of that magnitude. But don't get caught up in your own head. Get out of your own way. That Ryan Holiday's new book, The Obstacle is the Way. In a lot of cases, you're the obstacle. You're getting in your own way. And I think for me, it was very much okay, you know what, I need to do this. Okay, I've made this decision. Now I need to support that decision with something measurable and manageable, so that way I can look back at it and go, oh, when I made that decision, I had a plan in place, as opposed to I quit and then going, uh-oh, now what?
Yeah, nice. Can you share with us a little bit about that plan, like how, maybe not full structure? I've had dads who said they did a presentation to their wives. I had dads who
no my presentation to my wife was she asked me how work was, and I said, oh, I quit. That was my presentation. No, I think the way I mapped it out was I had said, look, when I decided that I was going to quit, I looked at the numbers and said, all right, I'm bringing in X amount of money. If I step down to full-time, because that was the decision too, is the whole idea was, okay, I'm not going to be a manager anymore, but I don't want to be a full-time employee either, because I want power. I want the control. I want to be able to say to them when they ask me to stay late, no, as opposed to if I'm full-time and they say, and I go to them, hey, I'd like to go home early, and they say no. So I wanted to take as much control back as possible. Mm-hmm. But doing that, I had to make some other sacrifices, and they were all monetary, right? Yeah. I had enough seniority there where I was going to be able to go to pretty much whatever department I wanted to, and I did. But I knew that scheduling would be a problem. Scheduling would be a concern. So luckily we had daycare at that point in time, so it wasn't that much of a concern. I also knew that if I stepped down to part-time, then during that bandwidth that I was freeing up, I needed to plan out how I was going to move forward with my comedy stuff. I couldn't just sit, okay, well, I'm going to go home and think about what I need to do. No, I needed to have an action plan in place. So and the other thing that I did, which I think was wise, is whenever I've quit something, I've always given a month's notice. Not 2 weeks, not 6 weeks, 1 month. And the reason is that 2 weeks flies by now, yeah. And that doesn't give, basically by the time they're ready to deal with it, there's only like a half a week to a week left. Yeah. So I like the 4-week option, plus it gave me time to adjust. It gave me the ability to go, all right, you know what, I'm going to phase out of this, and I'm going to phase into that. So that was the genesis of it. But the big thing was financial. We had to say, all right, well, what aren't we going to buy anymore? Okay, I can't just go out and buy a 6-pack of beer anytime I want one, or I can't just go out for dinner. So we had to make some conscious choices. But the nice thing about that was my wife was on board with that before I even stepped down. She wanted to go out to dinner less. She wanted to, me not to, necessarily go out and have a beer with the guys every time I was done work. So the wheels were already set in motion. I just put a new spin on them by saying, hey, there's no money to do it now. So, again, cutting off. And I think that was, but the big one, I think overall, was just looking at my daughter and saying, okay, this person is my responsibility in more than just financial means or anything like they need to be able to. I want to spend as much time with them as possible to help them become the person that they can become. Because I grew up in a house, as I'm sure many people in my generation did, two full-time job parents, latchkey kid to a certain extent for me. I'd come home after school and from 3:30 to 5:30 be me and Transformers and G.I. Joe and Thundercats on the TV.
Nice, I love Thundercats.
So I didn't want that for my daughter, and I don't begrudge anyone who's doing that. I just didn't want that, and so that was all part of the larger scheme. And honestly, one of the ways that you can do this is by just mind mapping it out, like just mind mapping it, or using the Eisenhower method, which is like more people know it as the Covey matrix, but basically saying, hey, you know what? Like taking a look at the larger sense of something and saying, all right, what's urgent and important, what's urgent but not important, and taking a look at all that. And that's actually where I kind of came up with the crucial cube concept that's in my Productivityist workbook. Is in the middle of that quadrant is a square. I call it the crucial cube because alliteration. But basically in there I put the mission behind it, like kind of like your vision statement. So for me it was how to make a living as a creative artist and support my daughter all at the same time. And then, okay, here are the things that I need to do. And it was really great because there were certain things that I thought I needed to do, and then when I categorized them in that quadrant or in the crucial cube exercise, I found, oh, these things are falling in the not urgent, not important stuff, so they don't even need to be done. And some of the things that I thought were urgent and important were actually just important but not urgent. So you need to. There's that saying, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And I think that when you're making a decision like that, you need to find a way to chronicle it in some fashion, so that when the time comes, you don't go, oh, why did I do this again? That way you can look back and say, whether it's a vision board or the crucial cubes I use or whatever, you can look back and go, oh yeah, that's why. That's why. Because your brain will trick you. You have that part of your brain, especially as entrepreneurs, there's the one part of your brain that's like, I can't wait to do all these awesome things. And then the other part of your brain goes, but you know what? Target's hiring. Do you know what I mean? So, or I don't really want it. But what about, why don't you just go watch TV for a little while? The Voice is on. And the other, well, yeah, but there's this new book I want. So you're always going to have that war with yourself. So you need supporting documentation, to be able to make these things happen on a regular basis. Otherwise, if you leave your brain to its own devices without the human component to it, it's really just a giant computer that will go wherever, whatever processes it decides to go down. So you just have to decide what kind of user you want to be. Do you want to be the user that's the entrepreneur, or do you want to be the user that's the couch potato?
Nice. Yeah, I love that. And I definitely love the concept that you have with the crucial cubicle there. And now, so you talked about, and it is a perfect segue because you talked about, having the documentation to keep you focused on what and focus on your why and what you're doing this. Now, what happens, and can you share with us a time when you came across failure? Because then, once you come across failure, you have doubt, and that focus there, and starts to creep in even more. Have you come across that, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I've come across my share of failure over time. I mean, the reason I left Costco wasn't to do this productivity stuff. It was to be a comedian. It was to do sketch comedy. It was to perform stand-up and all that kind of stuff. And when I was doing stand-up, I killed it in Victoria, and then I went up to a community called Comox, a very different type of community, and I bombed. I got heckled off the stage. When I was doing sketch comedy, we were performing for audiences, in Vancouver, Seattle. We went to San Francisco Sketchfest and opened for Bruce McCullough at Kids in the Hall.
Nice.
We were on our way. But the problem is that there were other people in the troupe that had, their obligations. They had their day jobs, and I was the only one that was kind of like, no, but I really want to make this work. And eventually it became too heavy of a cross to bear. I was basically doing a lot of the work. So I had to decide, all right, do I want to be a comedian still? I mean, the other reason that you don't necessarily want to be a comedian is I don't know if you know this, but comedians have to go on the road a lot. So I would be away from my family.
Yeah.
So what happened was, and again, this serendipitous falling into the productivity space by doing the productivity parody stuff, that's how I got connected with David Allen, who then, his team said, hey, write for the GTD Times, and then I went to write for Work Awesome, and then became the managing editor of Lifehack, and so on and so forth. But now, I mean, the reason I'm doing the podcast, I love to perform. The reason I do workshops, I love to perform. The reason I'm doing keynotes and all that, I love speaking. I love getting up in front of an audience, and what I try to do with my work now is I try to make it as accessible as possible through, making it as light but still informative, because let's face it, time management and task management, kind of a dry topic, it can get boring. So you need to try to, so for me, that's been my biggest challenge. And yeah, I mean, I fail consistently doing it right now. There are people that I've tried to, talk to and say, hey, this is what I think, you should be doing, and they say, well, that's not going to work for me, and you're wrong. And there's no way I can convince them. So my failure is maybe in that case, what I'll do is I'll say, all right, well, what do I do next time? Maybe there's another angle I should approach. Like I don't use the camping metaphor when I'm in Manhattan talking to people because they're like, what, camping? I don't understand. Just like I wouldn't use the big city metaphor here on the island necessarily. So, but I mean, when I've failed, I always look back, and I journal a lot too. I think this is critical. Anybody who, especially if you're a stay-at-home dad and you want to keep or a stay-at-home parent, period, and an entrepreneur, and you want to keep your head on straight, you got to journal. I journal every day before I go to bed because it empties my brain out. It sets me up for the next day, and I get to celebrate my successes, acknowledge the failures, and kind of line things up for the next day or for the next week or for whatever. I mean, one entry I actually did one entry in the morning last week when my kids were watching TV really quietly, and I was just smiling at them. Took a picture and just wrote about how awesome it was that they were both there doing that. So for me, when I find that failures occurred, what I'll do is I'll look at the systems that I've got in place and see where the failures, like where it let me down. And that's when I started, especially as my business got busier, I said, okay, well, I'm not paying as much attention to my kids now. How do I fix that? Or I'm not paying enough attention to my business. How do I fix that? So I started theming my days, right? So when I wake up in the morning, I know, oh, it's Monday. This is a day that I'm supposed to spend time doing admin work and email and acknowledging that stuff. It's a heavy lifting admin day and a light lifting parenting and creative day. Tuesday and Wednesday, my son's in daycare. So what am I doing? Well, or no, my son's at home with me rather. So those are called daddy duty days, and I'm a heavy lifting dad that day. And yeah, I might do some social media updating and stuff like that, but by and large, you're not going to be able to talk to me those days. Thursday, creative day. Friday, meeting day. Saturday is a family day, and Sunday is another creative day. If I don't have those set in place, then I'm already a little bit behind the 8 ball, because if all else fails, when I look at my list and I get stuck, I can look at the day and go, oh wait, I'm supposed to be writing today. And then you can see the calendar behind me. I also theme my months too. So, and by theming my months, what I mean is I'll say, what big project do I want to move forward in this month? Because if I get stuck on the day and I'm like, okay, it's supposed to be a creative day, but what creative thing am I supposed to do? Oh wait, I'm supposed to be working on my courses, or I'm supposed to be working on my book, or in the summer months, because I don't theme every month, I don't have a theme. So I can say, all right, well, I don't work on any really massive projects in the summer, which allows me to, focus a little bit more on the things that I need to be doing regularly. So when I've failed, and I still do, I always take a look at what part of my workflow did the bottleneck occur in. What can I do differently next time? But I don't beat myself up over it. If anything, I beat my system up over it more than anything else.
Nice. Awesome. So yeah, so fail, and then adjust, and kind of evaluate and see where you could improve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nice, nice. So can you share with us a moment, or we talked about why we do this, right? As startup dads, why we decide to go into entrepreneurship. Have you felt a moment, and we often feel multiple moments, but can you share with us one moment that you really felt like this is all worth it, right? Everything that I'm doing, all the planning that I'm doing, the time that you are away from your children, like going to the conference that you just went to. Um, have you had that moment that really summed it all up for you and said, yeah, this is I'm on the right path?
I've had a few, and I mean, I had one just the other day. I had a coaching client who uh, basically at the end of our session said, I really appreciate all the work you do on your blog and stuff like that. It's really helped me out. I had one gentleman who said that they'd been following my work for a long time, and I helped them start their own business because of the stuff I was saying. I had one gentleman you see right here. I don't know if you could see it right yet, but there's my Green Lantern ring. I wrote
Nice.
about that in the front nine. And a quick story at the World Domination Summit last year, which is in Portland, Chris Guillebeau's conference.
Yeah, I was there last year.
Right. So I was there, and we were at the Deschutes Brewery, as you do, uh, and a bunch of us were standing around, and my podcasting partner, Michael Schechter, said somewhere, just out of nowhere, off the cuff remark, he said, Vardy, how are you able to write a book about golf and throw a Green Lantern reference in there, and still try to bring it back to golf? Like, I don't like, it was something along those lines. And one guy's eyes lit up, and he goes, "Are you Mike Vardy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he showed me, and he had a Blue Lantern ring on. And he said that he read my book, and he's very big on avatars like I am, and he bought the ring because of that. And I get goosebumps even talking about it now. It blew me away. And of course, Schechter's been there for a lot of those moments too, because it happened at New Media Expo this year earlier as well, where we were doing a podcasting panel with Chase Reeves, and there was a gentleman in the casino, and Schechter was having breakfast, and the other guy was there, and he didn't know what to go see. And Schechter said, "Oh, you should come to our panel." And he mentioned some of the. He goes, "And yeah, me and Justin Jackson, Chase Reeves, and Mike Vardy." And the guy was like, "Mike Vardy's going to be there? I love his work. I've got all his books." And Schechter's like, "Oh man, like." So
I'm gonna be there too. Like,
yeah. Well, but he always, if you've listened to the Mike's on Mike's podcast now of course titled Workflowing, you'll hear that he likes to, we have this camaraderie where he likes to put me down, and I kind of take it because I play the Canadian and he's the Jew from Brooklyn, and so whenever that happens, it totally like kiboshes his ability to basically fake put me down.
right.
So I've had those moments, and they're absolutely what makes it worthwhile.
Awesome.
Between seeing my kids and that, and my wife had the experience of when I was doing the creativeLIVE talk in San Francisco. The gentleman who has the Blue Lantern ring, Travis, came down because I was in town, and we hung out. And my wife was like, "I cannot believe that you bought this ring because of my husband." Like, so it's just yeah, those moments are awesome. I mean, I have way more of those moments than the moments where I'm at home and I'm like, "Man, this is tough. Wouldn't it be just easier to go back and do a 9-to-5 job?" Because I can call back to those moments and say, no, my job is this. This is what I'm in the business of, helping people become more productive, stop doing productive and start being productive. And I try to do it at a cost that is accessible to a lot of people, because I'm not. That's one of my big missions. So it's a value statement for me. Is I mean, I don't want to undervalue my efforts, but I also want to be able to help as many people as possible. And there's a fine balancing act. But yeah, like, I mean, you just have me talking about them, and it just brings it all back to the forefront. And those moments actually spur me into action in a lot of ways. as opposed to having me sit on my butt, because I do that. I procrastinate from time to time too. I mean, I'm human. We're all human, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I looked at your prices, and the prices were very reasonable. So startup dads, definitely head over there to productivityist.com, right?
Yep, and the coaching stuff has been great, because I've had people that have said, you know, it doesn't matter what app they use or whatever. And I'm very big on approaches over the apps, because apps come and go, and the danger about, you know, you never know. An app could be bought up. Like SpringPad would be a great example. There was one that was just bought up recently. You know, and I mean, there's ones that you know are going to be around. Like Asana, I highly doubt will be ever bought up, because, you know, Dustin is one of the richest people on the planet and probably doesn't need the money. And he's very big. I mean, him and Justin are big believers in the GTD model, and they really want to help people. So I think that the coaching's been huge, because I love getting up and performing in front of people and doing workshops for large groups, but I also love the one-on-one interaction, because I can help people. I can get that much closer to helping people out, and sometimes it's just the smallest little thing that really flips the switch for them. And sometimes it's, you know, my wife's an acupuncturist, right? So we actually we had this conversation where I said, you know, we're both in the same kind of business now, where people seem to think that for acupuncture that you can go once and you're cured, the ailment, but it's a series of treatments. And with productivity, it can be the same way. You know, I mean, you can break certain things, but in a lot of cases, you need to, you know, come back on a couple of. You need to foster it. And and my goal with coaching is to eventually no longer need to coach them. Is for being able to go, okay, go ahead, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. I wanted to do one-on-one coaching, because it gives me the ability to affect people in the most direct way possible, and it in a way that they can walk away at some point going, you know what, I can do this now with the approaches that, you know, I've been fostering with Mike. I have my own workflow, my own system, my own foundation, and now I'm good to go.
Nice, awesome. So Mike, we're entering to the tail end of the interview here, and we were talking about applications, and this is one of my favorite segments where we dive into your toolbox. And I ask you, like, how, and this is a perfect one for you, because I ask you, like, what are some of the tips and tricks and apps and hacks that you use to kind of, you know, to make this all happen? So, are you ready for this part?
I'm always ready to talk about apps.
Awesome. What is your number one time management tool or hack or application?
No, that's a tough one, but right now, I mean, honestly, I use paper a lot, but I use paper as like the gateway, right? So I have a system I talk about on my site called the strike-through system, and it basically is something that you can do to really foster that art of capturing, because that's the biggest roadblock for a lot of people with productivity, especially entrepreneurs, is they have ideas and then they say, oh, I'll remember it later, and then they don't. So I use paper as kind of the gateway to my to-do list application or my task management application. So for me, I would say that my most productive application at this point is probably Todoist. It's a web-based application, but obviously there's native, and there's so many platforms it's available for. It's available for Windows, the Mac, Android, iOS, Kindle, Fire. Like, you can get it pretty much anywhere. The nice thing about Todoist, I wrote a post about why I switched to Todoist from actually another popular application, OmniFocus, and even I don't use Asana nearly as much as I used to, is because Todoist has that ubiquity going for it. Again, it can be in your pocket, it can be on the web, it can be in your Kindle Fire if you want it to be. You can also collaborate on it, so you can have team-based projects that are going on it, so you can share with others. So my wife and I use it actually for my business. And then the other thing I really like about it is just the user interface is really clean. You know, you can scale really well with it. It can be a simple little to-do list app if you want, or you can scale it out and trick it out pretty far-fetched. So that would be the one that I use, and it's also got the ability for you to email tasks to it, because I'm a big believer in getting out of your email inbox and into the places you should be. So on iOS, I use Dispatch as my email app, and what I can do from there is I can actually send tasks directly to Todoist from my email application. Same thing with Evernote. You can do it with Evernote. You can do it with OmniFocus. You can do it with Asana. I hardly check email on my Mac anymore. I generally check it on my iPhone or my iPad because it's an action-oriented email application. It gets me out of my email inbox and into the places that I need to be, because email is a two-way street. It's like spending all your day on the telephone while trying to do work. You're not going to be nearly as effective. So if you're an iOS user, I would highly recommend getting Dispatch as your email application. Is like $5, but it's the best $5 you'll ever spend on an app. And then for task management, I use Todoist. And then for resource and email reference materials, Evernote. I use Evernote, and I'm sure you use. Do you use it as well, Joel?
Yeah, I use Evernote for almost everything.
I use Evernote. What I've done is I keep track of my beer cellar in Evernote. I keep track of for my virtual assistant. What I did is I created a notebook that I shared with her, and then I actually have a best practices notes, and I can update those in real time. So then she'll get the updated best practices. Nice. So the nice thing about Evernote is that again, I'm very big on 3 areas when you're picking an app or a system. It needs to be simple, because simplicity scales, and simple allows you to get into it without much of a learning curve. It needs to be obvious. And the thing is that Evernote is obviously where notes and files go in terms of, tasks go in Todoist. Writing, I use Scrivener for all my writing now. That's the obvious, where's my writing app? Oh, it's Scrivener. So there's an obviousness to it. And the other S is scalable. So SOS, the apps and the systems that will help you. Simple, obvious, and scalable, because you need to be able to, something like a simple to-do list app or Outlook Express. Oh man, I've had people that have said, "Oh, I use Outlook Express to manage my tasks." I'm like, "And how productive are you?" Right. It doesn't scale very well. So you want to have apps that can scale well and systems that scale. So just keep that acronym in mind, SOS. And by scale, it also can scale into your personal life. I use Todoist for personal tasks too. I use Evernote for, like I said, I don't think the beer cellar qualifies as work. Right. I wish it did, because I could write some stuff off. But yeah, so those 4 apps are kind of they make up the crux, and Scrivener with the 5th app being for writing. They make up the gestalt, my productivity gestalt, basically.
Nice. Awesome. Now, how do you balance between family and business?
Well, Saturday we is family day. Like that is a day where no work gets checked, no email gets dealt with, none of that stuff. So that's a big one. And then just making sure that I don't use, like, contexts are very big when it comes to GTD or productivity. Like making sure you attach labels in Todoist. They're called labels, but contexts are essentially what they are. Is making sure that I don't call home office and office home. I don't have. Office is not a context that I keep track of. In fact, as we record this, where I am right now, this is the master bedroom of our house. We have a tenant that lives downstairs. This is my office. So it's very easy for me to work into the wee hours of the morning if I want to, especially while my wife's out of town. But I'm very cognizant of home time is home time and business time is business time. And if you're a stay-at-home parent with kids that are school-aged, you set those boundaries, and that's the hardest thing to do. So I've got one more year of my son being in daycare, and he's actually going to daycare an additional day this year on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Normally Tuesdays would be the daddy duty day, but now that's not going to be the case anymore. But what I'm going to do is I'm scaling back my hours on those other days so that when my son comes home from daycare, he's got dad here with him. Nice. And the other thing I'm doing is on Thursdays, it used to be a coaching day, but my wife and my son are home on Thursdays. That's not going to be the case anymore. Thursday will not be a day I take coaching calls, because it's not fair to my wife and my son, and it's not fair to my clients, because my son could make a noise and they're like, oh, I wish we could have more quiet. So Tuesday becomes that day. And again, having that forethought, being able to, and that's, I think, the awareness. I've actually got, it's funny, like I said, I'm big on avatars. This thing right here. So I have a block that just says awareness. I picked this up at the Ottawa airport earlier this year. Those kind of things, like just being able to look and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is the time. I even picked up, and you might not be able to, I'll see if I can get it to there. So the glare.
Now. Yeah.
It's from a company called Tiny Time Machines. It's not a watch. It's a bracelet, but it looks like a watch. And that's what because I'm very, very big on, my TEDx talk was focus on task over time. And I'm very big on task management over time management. I think that that philosophy of focusing on the tasks at hand over the time you have on hand leads to a better quality of work. I think we focus too much on quantity rather than quality these days. And that to me is one of the things that allows you to kind of separate that home and that work and the work stuff. Because if you do the right things during your workday, if you do the hard stuff, the high energy stuff, I use energy levels a lot with my work.
Yeah.
Then you can really move the right things forward, so that you're not sitting there at the end of the day going, hey, I need to check that email. I need to do this. I need to do that. Because I'm not a guy that answers email at 2 or 3 in the morning. Because once you do that, from now on, that person that's emailing you back, they're not just getting the message that you're replying to them with. They're also getting the message that, hey, if I email Mike at 2 in the morning, he's going to respond. Yeah. So you need to set boundaries for yourself as an entrepreneur and/or as a stay-at-home parent. Because if you don't set boundaries and respect them, no one else will, and they'll set them for you.
Nice, awesome. So, Mike, what's one book, blog, or magazine every startup dad should read?
The Front Nine is not. I would say, oh man, there's a lot of good ones. Getting Things Done is a really good book in terms of. It really does. It teaches you how to build a system. I mean, you may not want to use the GTD systematic approach because it can be taxing at first to learn. And I've read the book numerous times, and every time I read it, I get something a little bit different out of it. It's that good of a book. Another book that I really like that I revisit is I was just on the. Let me take a look at my library over there. Oh man, there's so many. There's just so many. I would say Getting Things Done is one that you definitely want to pick up. It's just one of those books that and the $100 Startup's another great one by Chris Guillebeau. He's got a new book coming out really soon called The Happiness of Pursuit, which I just got my copy in the mail today, so I'm going to check that out. But Getting Things Done is one of those books where have it in your library, pick it up when you need it. I think it's a really, really helpful tool in terms of building systems. Another great one is Making Ideas Happen by Scott Belsky. So that's the kind of stuff that I read. Although I am getting back into fiction book. I just picked up John Scalzi's new book too. So the funny thing is once you start to implement some of these practices that are in these books, you actually get to start doing some leisure reading instead of just reading books about the stuff. The Martian by Andy Weir is one of the best books I've read in a long time. So, but yeah, David Allen's Getting Things Done it tends to be the one that always creeps in for me.
Getting Things Done, awesome. We'll definitely share that in the show notes. So now we're at the final question for the interview. And it's a little bit of a long one, but it's usually one of the most impactful ones and ones that keep the dads focused going forward. So I'll read it through, and then you could give us your answer. Then we'll ask you to share anything else you want to share with the Startup Dad community about yourself, and then we'll say goodbye after that.
Sounds good.
All right, so the question is, on the other side of this broadcast, listening in, is a dad who at this point is fired up and ready to go. But as soon as the broadcast is over, he'll put down his mobile device or close his computer, and life will go on to happening. And by next week, he'll find himself right back in the day-to-day minutia of things. What would you say to that dad to inspire him beyond this broadcast?
That's a great question. What I would say to the dad that's watching this right now, or listening to this, or taking this all in, is get as soon as this is over, grab your a piece of paper, grab a notebook, start writing down all the things that are going on in your head in terms of what you really want to move forward, or grab a whiteboard or whatever. Do something like that. Something that is visual, something that isn't going to just disappear in your computer, because electronic clutter is, it's becoming the new sadness because it's hard to find that stuff. I would get that stuff out there, and make that the genesis of your vision board. Make that the genesis of where you want to go. Make that the beginning of your roadmap. And then and mark it down. I mean, if it means marking it down on like permanent marker or something like that, then do that on the whiteboard. Like wreck a whiteboard if you have to, but make sure that it's there. And then start to take small measured steps to making that happen. You know, everybody's talked about this. All task management and productivity specialists talk about breaking your tasks down into, or your projects down into smaller bite-sized chunks. Don't try to swallow the elephant whole. You know, like break it down into something that you can manage, and really understand what you're capable of at any given moment. Like really tap into you. You know, connect with you, and that's why I mean, close the computer too. Like when you're writing this down, don't go looking up my book. Don't go, you know, looking at past episodes. Close your laptop, turn off your mobile device, and do it that way, because the best way for you to connect with yourself and what you really want is to disconnect from everything else. So do that, and then start to build out your framework, your approach, your foundation with that awareness in mind, and those small measured steps that you've captured. And then the biggest thing you could do is do that every day. Every time you have an idea, capture it. And just start building that capture habit. And once you start doing that, then your brain will be free to do a lot of the things it's meant to do. I mean, your brain is meant to be a factory, not a warehouse, right? And John Cleese has this great talk. Again, don't watch it after this presentation. Just write down that you're going to watch it. John Cleese says you need two things to be truly creative: time and space. You can't just have one. If you have all the time in the world but no space, if you're in like a little closet, you're going to feel really clustered, right? If you have all the space in the world and no time, you're going to feel rushed. You need both. So build yourself that space, give yourself that time, and the only way you can do that is by starting to build an approach and a workflow that's going to work for you.
Awesome, Mike. Awesome. And one of the quotes we love here at Startup Dad is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yep.
So to wrap up, why don't you give us a little bit anything you want to share with Startup Dad before we say goodbye?
Just go to my site when you're able, productivityist.com. It's productivity with IST at the end and then .com. I've got a lot of articles there. I have some guest posts. There's the coaching options there. My books are there. You do all that stuff, but really, like, if you're not using a task manager at this point, pick one, find one, use one. We talked about Asana, we talked about Todoist. Those kind of things. I mean, if I didn't have my task management system in place, if I didn't have my productivity gestalt, I'd be not nearly where I am today. So that's my big advice is start to build your system, because it's your system and you're the only one that's going to build it. So, but thanks so much for having me, Joel. I really appreciate it. I don't get to do a lot of these with parent stuff. I mean, I'm going to the Dad 2.0 Summit, right?
Yeah,
so
I'll see you there.
Yeah. So, and I missed it last year because I had a family, fittingly, although I don't know if I want to use that word, I had a family emergency come up, so I wasn't able to go. I was supposed to speak last year, but this year I'm going as an attendee. So, and we're talking about even bringing my family down. So we'll see if that pays off, because, and it may just be me and my kids. My wife might stay home because, she's giving me 3 days off, so maybe I'll give her 3 days off.
Awesome. That's awesome. Great. Thanks. It was an honor having you on, and I love having these discussions with other dads. So thanks for your time, Mike.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey Startup Dads, take the next step right now and download your free guide called 9 Apps Every Startup Dad Should Have in His Toolbox. It's only available at startupdadhq.com/free gift. Again, that's startupdadhq.com/free gift. So go download it now, and we'll see you next time on Startup Dad HQ.